The first word that comes to mind is kind. She's a very, very considerate person. She has a genuine interest in getting to know you and what you care about and things like that. So all conversations are deeply honest, and she's a great person.
Gayle is a brilliant and passionate writer. She's one of the best writers that I've ever met. And if I ever needed something to be scripted or written, I knew I could always hand it off to Gayle. And even to this day, I still do.
I really think that the heart that she showed in her letters from the editor in style and just showing up at these events was really impactful to the community.
Gayle Guynup was born in Miami, Florida on July 8, 1957, the youngest daughter of Betty Louise and Wesley Leroy Guynup, her sister Karen, 10 years older.
I was in Miami until I was 5 years old, and then we moved over here to Bradenton.
In Bradenton, her father owned the Nautilus Shell Store. He was a happy, jovial man who was everybody's friend.
People would come to the store just to tell him stories and to chat the day away, back when people talked about politics and things like that. Everybody would just stop by, and he was just such a wonderful, wonderful guy. He was happiest, there's no doubt about it, when he was out on the boat. He would go fishing and bring home a snook for dinner at night, and that's when he was at his happiest, when he was out in nature. His love for the environment is something that he definitely passed on to his two daughters.
Her mother was a private person who worked with her father doing all of the accounting and other office work. She worked all day downstairs in the store, but also took care of her daughters.
The store was downstairs and our home was upstairs. So she would go upstairs and always have 3 meals on the table every day for us. And her big thing was taking care of her 2 girls. She made sure that we had all the opportunities that she did not growing up in the Depression. She just wanted to make sure that her girls had all of the opportunities that she did not have.
Growing up with a sister 10 years older was a different experience for a sibling.
My sister is quite simply my best friend. And growing up, I think because of the difference in our ages, she was more like a second mother to me than a sister. So we weren't that close when we were young. We had nothing in common, but as we've gotten older, we've become the best of friends.
As a young girl, Gayle enjoyed exploring the shell store.
What a neat thing to have downstairs. So I would go downstairs and these big shipments of shells would come in, and I would, take them out of the boxes, and, it was like Christmas every day, and Dad would make these interesting little things out of shells, and he would put me to work doing some of that.
Her father drove her to Orange Ridge Elementary School each day.
Started in kindergarten there, kindergarten through 6th grade, and it was wonderful. It was a neat little school. I loved school from my first day there. I loved going to school. I loved classes, I loved reading, I loved writing, I loved everything about school. So it was just like playtime for me. It was really fun.
While Gayle enjoyed exploring the shell shop, she and her sister both had jobs to do.
When I was little, I worked in the store. And both my sister and I did. And she was very creative. My sister and I are kind of polar opposites. I'm a writer, she's an artist. She's a fabulous cook. I can't boil water. But she would do the creative, crafty things in the store, and I would work the cash register and the adding machine.
Bradenton was a much different place in the 1960s. It was a small town where people felt safe.
Everybody knew everybody. I could ride my bike all over, and not worry about anything. It was just kind of an idyllic place to grow up.
Gayle also loved going to the beach, feeling the sand in her toes and the salt air in her face, and diving into the warm Gulf waters.
Whenever I got the opportunity, you would find me out on those beaches, and I think my footprints are still on the sands out there today. But that was my great joy, or being out in the boat with Dad. That was my other great, source of fun.
The beach was also a place where Gayle found peace and began to focus on writing.
Even as young as, I would say 5th or 6th grade, I would take my journal out there and I would write stories. I knew then that I wanted to be a writer. And that's where I did all of my writing, was out on those beaches.
Gayle attended Orange Ridge Elementary, Bradenton Middle School, and Southeast High School. She was a good student who excelled in most of her classes.
My favorite subjects were humanities, English, of course, social studies, all of those subjects, everything except math, which even to this day is a mystery to me. I am just horrible at math. The only other class that was I really didn't like so much was phys ed, and I became a master at thinking up excuses to get me out of that most days.
She was a member of the National Honor Society, vice president of her senior class, and most importantly, was the editor of her high school's weekly newspaper.
And that was my first job as editor, and I had the time of my life. I just adored it. It was mostly campus news, but we managed to get in a few stories about what was happening in the city and what was happening to our neighbors and what was happening. You know, there would be something would come up about the beaches, something would come up about, you know, local politics, and we would manage to tie it to the students and to where we were at, and it was really fun. It gave me the chance to broaden my horizons and to see the impact that, even in high school, the impact that a newspaper can have.
Besides editing the school newspaper, Gayle was the radio voice for the Southeast High School Seminoles football team,
which was a really bad team at that time. I think we went the whole year with no victories one year, and so it's really hard to be optimistic when you're talking on the radio and saying, and we're only behind by 35 points.
If all that didn't keep her busy enough, she also landed jobs with local newspaper publications.
Worked for the Bradenton Herald, the St. Petersburg Times, and I attended the Poynter Institute. So I was starting to pave the way for what I knew my career was going to be.
Gayle graduated from high school in 1975 and entered what was then Manatee Community College.
I just didn't feel quite ready to go on to a university, and I was applying for some scholarships and other things, and working because I put myself basically through school, with mom and dad's help, of course. And so I took 2 years to earn a little money and get ready to go to school. But my years at MCC were wonderful. I got a great education there, came away with my associate in arts degree. And then I was really ready to move on to USF in Tampa.
She soon put her interest in broadcast radio behind her and focused on journalism at USF.
I had finally figured out that I was not going to be the first woman sportscaster, so if I couldn't be the first, I didn't want to do it. So I went on, and I knew that I wanted to do journalism. I majored in mass communications. But when I started taking my courses, I became very enamored with magazines. And what I loved about magazines was the fact that you can tell a story. And I'm at heart a storyteller.
In her senior year, she became editor of the daily campus newspaper, The Oracle.
That meant a whole different schedule for me. I would go to classes from 8 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, eat something real fast, and then work from 4 till midnight on the paper. So that was my schedule for an entire year and a half. But I have never gotten a better education than I got doing the Oracle. It was the best. And it was an exciting time in journalism because we were just switching over from the lead type to computers. And so it was right at that time, and it was an amazing time to be a part of that.
Gayle graduated from USF in 1982 with a Bachelor of Arts and immediately moved to Atlanta to work for Communication Channels.
Just walked right into Communication Channels, and they hired me on the spot. I was very brash back then, and they hired me. They were a company that did numerous trade magazines. I mean, like 20 different trade magazines, and Atlanta Magazine. I worked on so many different trade magazines. The last one I worked on was an aviation magazine, Commuter Air and Airline Executive and those magazines. I knew it wasn't where I wanted to be or what I wanted to be writing about, but it was another great learning ground.
In 1984, she was on vacation with a friend in New York City. While he was interviewing for a job, Gayle decided she would explore the city.
I got in this elevator and started talking to the man next to me, which, hey, I'm from Florida. I talk to people. And we started talking, and it turns out he was the publisher of a travel magazine for airline employees. Well, we got up to the 16th floor where his office was, and he offered me a job. And I accepted. So 2 weeks later, I'm living in New York City. It was just the most amazing experience.
While her friend did not get his job, Gayle thrived in New York City. From the very beginning, she immersed herself in the culture of the city.
For 3 years, I lived in New York, went and found a beautiful little apartment in Brooklyn, and worked in Manhattan. And I loved everything about New York. I did the museum. My first night there, the publisher said, I've got these 2 front row center seats to Cats. Do you want to go see it? And yes, I grabbed them. And so my first night in New York, I went to see, this amazing show, and went to Sardi's, of course, for dinner. And I just did the whole New York experience. It was just so much fun.
New York City in the 1980s was experiencing a dark period. Crime was on the increase, and Gayle was not immune from its impact.
In the 3 years I was there, I was mugged or robbed 5 times. And that's what eventually led to my decision to come back home.
Both of her parents were ill, and Gayle decided between crime in New York City and her parents' health, it was time for her to return to Sarasota, where in 1986, she was promptly hired by Sarasota Magazine as general manager.
For 3 years, I was general manager and did a lot of writing and did all of the, behind the scenes, making sure the issue got out, and did a lot of proofing and writing and all the things that happen in the background to make a magazine come out.
She left the magazine in 1988 and was working in the marketing department for the Medieval Fair, which was then held at the Ringling Museum grounds. At that time, local restaurateur and wine aficionado Michael Klauber was planning to create a local wine fest on the grounds. He went to the Ringling for advice.
They said, we've got this great woman that can help you in starting to get some of the publications together and some of the organization, and went to this semi-trailer with office, and there's Gayle. And we hit it off immediately. She had very little experience in wine, and so it was a great education for her and a great education for me about organization and structuring an event like that.
I agreed to do the marketing and to help him get started on that.
Together, we really did create that first event. We were attached at the hip through that whole process.
For 4 years, we ran the Florida Wine Fest and built it into the 3rd largest wine event in the country.
That began an association that would last for 14 years.
We just worked so well together. It was an immediate thing. We just really worked well together. And he invited me to come and do the marketing for his businesses, which were expanding at the time.
We actually created, along with the Michaels on East team, a marketing company called Splash Marketing a few years later. And we collected a couple of really talented art directors and graphic designers to work with us. And we managed all of the marketing for the Michaels on East facilities, and we had 4 or 5 restaurants at the time. The Colony Beach Resort, my brother's restaurant, and ultimately that's where we created the Gulf Coast Connoisseur Club together.
14 years, I still hear that number and I can't believe it, because it just went so fast. It was Michael. I have to say I learned more about marketing from Michael than any other person. He is the most natural marketing person I've ever met.
In 2001, the Sarasota Herald-Tribune was looking for a new editor of a fashion magazine called Style. Michael's marketing was on automatic, and Gayle felt it was time for her to move on.
I had always wanted to work with Diane McFarlane, and that is what really brought me to the Herald-Tribune. When a friend told me that the editorship of Style was they were looking for someone, and it would mean that I would get to work with Diane. I was over there the next day with my resume, and just was so thrilled when I got that job.
Working on Style magazine was Gayle's dream come true.
This was the job I had been waiting for, because it was my magazine to plan, to build, to do however I wanted to do it, basically. And we created something I think very special.
She so wanted every issue be so terrific, from the cover to the back. It was really important to her that it was very local, that it talked about people that we all know and love, plus some that we didn't know yet, and that we would learn about through the pages of Style.
In 2008, after 20 years as the social columnist for the Herald-Tribune, Marjorie North retired. When her first replacement didn't work out, Gayle stepped in.
It was a very natural fit for me to take over the social position, because it's who I was writing about in Style. Those were my readers. So I knew them, and I knew that audience. And so it was just a natural fit. And in fact, I was the one who went in and suggested it.
She has very vivid comparisons. When she talks about a cause, you really get into the cause with her. She's very explicit. She knows her subjects. She knows 99.5% of people in the community whom she writes about. So she sells the event to the community, literally.
She would promote the events so that if you weren't at the event that she was covering, you would still feel for it and go look into it and possibly donate to it.
I've been doing it for the last 8 years, and I'm now covering about 250 events a year, and it's really fascinating. It's really been a fascinating journey to get inside the philanthropic community in this town, because it is such an important part of what Sarasota is, who we are. And the people are fascinating. They are just, I've never seen such a community of selfless givers.
In her columns, Gayle emphasized the importance of the donors, but also made it a point to focus on the charities benefiting from the events.
I approached it from the point of view of the charity. What is this event about? What is the money being used for? Where is it going? So yes, I describe the event and I tell who's there and I tell about the decorate, yes, I do that, but it's more for me about the charity.
I think her love of the nonprofits, and she always really took a great concern about the smaller ones that didn't get all the hype that the big organizations always get. And she made a real effort to, when they had events, to cover at least one of their events a year, because she wanted to make sure that they got their due in the community. And a lot of the other journalists wouldn't cover it as much, and the photographers, because it was small. But she always made sure that she did and let people know what that organization was doing. And I think really she had such a love of all the organizations, but especially of the animal ones too.
During her career, Gayle has witnessed rapid changes in the medium and the challenges that now exist with the growth of social media.
I am just very thankful I started when I did, and that I had the opportunity to go from lead type to computers, and to see that change, and to then go to have the opportunity to work for the New York Times for a while, and to really see journalism at a very high level. And now we're moving into this new area, and only time will tell, what that means for the industry and for journalism in general. But I hope it doesn't replace the other forms of media, the newspapers and the magazines and the other forms of media that tell a really complete story. Social media is interesting, and I think newspapers and magazines, we're all still trying to figure out how to use it and how to make money using it. And that's the great challenge, how to make it all profitable in the end.
In February of 2019, Gayle became a casualty of those modern-day challenges when the owners of the Herald-Tribune suddenly canceled the publication of Style, and Gayle's position was ended.
Gayle was laid off, as were all the writers, which included me, of Style magazine. And that was something she had edited for 18 years.
It was strictly numbers. It was strictly, had nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my performance. In fact, the people there were so upset. It just touched me greatly, The decision did not come from the local office. It came from above, And it was strictly a matter of the numbers.
Now that she's not with the Herald-Tribune, I don't know how they're going to cover these events the way they have in the past. I mean, she did it so well, so thoroughly, and so generously.
I have seen this coming for about 6 months now. So about 6 months ago, I formed my own company, Content Connections, and I was just ready for this whenever it happened.
She has her own company now, which allows her to freelance wherever she wants, take pictures of whoever she wants, posts whatever she wants, and I'm really looking forward to applauding her success.
Gayle intends on continuing to write her letter from the editor because it was something that people love to read. So she's going to write it and put it on her Facebook page because it's something she wanted to continue.
I will be doing what I've done my whole life, which is create powerful content for websites, for traditional media, for corporate communications, any type of written content. And I'm also having fun because I'm writing biographies of some of the fabulous people in town, which is something I've always wanted to do.
Beyond her love of writing and capturing the stories of the people of Sarasota, Gayle has a passion for dogs and has specifically embraced the work of the Southeastern Guide Dog organization.
I got my first dog when I was 8 years old, a toy poodle named Bo, and I have had dogs my entire life, with one exception. The 3 years that I lived in New York, there was no grass where I lived in Brooklyn, so I couldn't figure out how to make a dog work. So, but other than that, I have always had dogs, and usually more than one or two. So 12 years ago, I believe, yes, I was writing a story for Style and on Southeastern Guide Dogs, and I went out there and looked around at this campus, and I don't know if you've ever walked into something and you just said, oh my goodness, I could feel my heart pounding. It was like, this is something I want to get involved with. Their mission of providing these guide dogs to the blind at no cost and providing these dogs to veterans with combat-related injuries. I mean, it just touched my heart.
One of her dog, Gem, is a lab, a golden lab, and it's my godchild. And she will go to hospitals. She has the permit, and the dog will wear the harness, and the dog will go to the hospital and go touch patients who look forward to that. It's a human contact. It's love.
Every Monday we go to Doctor's Hospital and work in Serenity Place, which helps people dealing with depression and anxiety and other problems. And Gem is just a little four-legged healer. People are sad when we come in or not smiling, and by the time we leave, they're laughing, they're on the floor, they're talking about maybe getting their own dog. It's like watching a life change right in front of you.
Gayle Guynup has been a wonderful and amazing friend to our organization, introducing so many new friends to Southeastern Guide Dogs and always promoting our mission in the community. Gayle and her dog Gem, who came from Southeastern Guide Dogs, are known to be all around Sarasota, spreading cheer and joy.
I'm so grateful to them, and I've continued to volunteer with them for 12 years. I'm on their advisory council. And last year, Titus Herman, the head of Southeastern, thanking me for my 12 years of service, gave me a puppy that I could train to become another ambassador dog. And her name is Marnie, and she is almost a year and a half now and weighs 60 pounds. And she will be an ambassador dog one day, and I will take her to hospitals or nursing homes or schools and do the same sort of work that I'm doing with Jem.
However people feel about their own children, I think that's how she feels about all her dogs. They are her family. They're her lifeblood. They mean so much to her. And if you've ever seen them, which I'm sure you had through the photographs, they love her and she loves them, and they're great dogs, and it's just a really meaningful part of her life.
Right now, I have 3 dogs. I have Jem, I have, who is a 6-year-old lab. I have Brandy, who is a 6-year-old golden retriever that I got from Golden Retriever Rescue, and I have little Marnie, not so little, I have Marnie, who is the yellow lab puppy from Southeastern.
We ask Gayle Guynup her advice for those who follow.
I've given this a little thought, and my first piece of advice would be pursue your passion. Find your passion and pursue it, and if you do that, you can't go wrong. My second piece of advice would be take a moment and put down your cell phone, put down your other electronic devices, and pick up a newspaper or a good book. I think you'll be amazed. My third piece of advice would be giving is about much more than writing a check. Giving is about making a difference. And that's what really matters. And my last piece of advice would be, when all else fails, remember the words of Charles Schulz. Happiness is a warm, cuddly puppy.